country does not violate any law, end quote. Is limited to presidents and his telling. If his supporters, for instance, believe that to be true, what stops them from doing whatever they want? Just ask the January 6th rioters who find themselves back in court for other offenses. According to the Wall Street Journal, many of them are right now arguing this, quote, that they should be absolved of other alleged crimes, such as illegal gun possession, child pornography, things discovered during the January 6th investigations. At least one defendant has died in a post-pardon altercation with police. And so that's the question now before all of us. Some people have taken to the streets about it. Some people are becoming more attuned to the news because they're unsettled by it. It's a question that'll be evaluated over the next days and weeks and years. Just how much power should Donald Trump really have? It's where we start the hour. Some of our favorite experts and friends. The president of Media Matters for America, Angela Carasone, is back. We started this conversation in the last hour. Also joining us, former prosecutor for the Southern and Eastern Districts of New York, Barrett Berger's back with us, and former assistant director for counterintelligence at the FBI, MSNBC national security analyst Frank Figliuzzi's here. Angela, let's pick up where we left off. People voted for Trump for a myriad of reasons, but not one of them in any of the exit polling data I saw, or any of the brilliant analyses provided by Steve Kornacki or anyone else I consumed, even on Fox News, said that people were down with ending the full Democratic experiment and installing a king. Again, talk about what is exposed on Trump's flanks here.
Yeah, I mean, the big issue is that a lot of people voted for him for the vibes. Not as core supporters. They voted for something that they wanted. They voted for this type of destruction and revenge. That is the core. That is the base upon which he sort of projected out this political power. But the way that he sort of got one, right, is he built political power on what used to be considered the fringes. So he brought in a bunch of these fringe figures, and now they're going to have to do a series of actions to be responsive to the people that they brought in. The scary part, as you noted in your intro, is that they started out with a really clear message and guidance, which is that we got your back. As long as you're doing things in line in support of Donald Trump, and in some way, shape, or form, you will not be held accountable for it. That's partly why those pardons are so uncomfortable. And that is sort of the context. That energies and the tactic is that all those people that did voted for him because they didn't believe policies are real and right. They still don't think they still don't believe things he said. Stiffen our spines, speak up, and speak to the very people that you identified that didn't really want this. They're along with all of us, are going to be the source of our democratic resilience, and that's what this is about. This is about scaring everybody into submission. Heroes are heroes for a reason, because most people, when they're confronted, duck and cover. And what they're trying to do right now is not just shift the vibes, but to get all those people that held their nose or voted for Trump for a myriad of reasons, as you noted, to now be stuck. And that's we're at a critical juncture.
I mean, Frank, the most basic reading of a slide toward autocracy deploys despair and hopelessness. And one of the things about Reince Priebus that I thought, watching him talk, is he is known to have been one of the biggest leakers, calling Trump crazy, saying all sorts of things about his colleagues and about Donald Trump. And I jotted down, while he was talking, I jotted down a quick list of the things that people have said publicly about Donald Trump. He's a demonic force, said Tucker Carlson. He's America's Hitler, said J.D. Vance. He's a, quote, despicable human, said Mitch McConnell. January 6th was an act of, quote, domestic terrorism, said Ted Cruz. The people carrying out the enforcement of whatever Trump is saying are all hypocritical in that they said worse things about Donald Trump than anyone on this program has ever said.
We're watching Exhibit A for an unmitigated desire for power and influence and relevancy. That's who surrounds Donald Trump right now. People who literally can't get another job without kissing his rear end. And this Reince Priebus clip that you played, Nicole, nothing to see here, as Angela said. Don't worry, remain calm. He occasionally likes to take a grenade out and throw it on the floor to see what happens. I'll tell you what happens when you play with a live grenade and toss it on the floor. Eventually it explodes. And the only question for us is whether it's going to explode back on Trump or explode and hurt the rest of us. And my money's on both, by the way. People are going to get hurt, and eventually it will blow back on Trump. And then, with regard to this statement, which again, we shall not believe Reince Priebus when he says, don't worry, that someone who saves his country cannot violate a law. Okay, it's been attributed by some historians who aren't certain to Napoleon, but I'll tell you where it's definitely been used far more recently, and that's with a white supremacist, far-right extremist named Anders Breivik in Norway, who killed 77 people in Norway, the worst modern mass murder in Norwegian history, including a mass murder neo-Nazi murderer. If you voted for that, you really need to question whether you're American anymore. But that's who's using that kind of statement. And listen, does Trump sit and read Norwegian history? Hell no. Someone is handing him this story, this quote, and we need to figure out who keeps spoon-feeding him the white supremacy, white terrorist philosophy.
You won't be surprised to hear, because you may be among them. It turns out the American people don't love watching Donald Trump and Elon Musk take an absolute wrecking ball to the federal government. I mean, today we saw massive protests right here in Washington, D.C., and also all across the country. You can see some of the photos on our screen. We saw protests in big cities and small towns and at state capitals. We saw just how pissed off people are about what's happening right now. And who blame them? I mean, we just learned that Elon Musk Doge crew is trying to get access to personal taxpayer data at the IRS. So basically, the world's richest man and his band of 20-something cronies want access to your personal data. They want access to your tax returns, your addresses, your employment information, your banking details, and your social security numbers. I mean, this is the kind of issue that hits home for all of us. I'm sure it hits home for you, because most of us pay taxes, right? Just like most of us fly on airplanes. And today, unbelievably, there was another major commercial airline incident. A Delta plane that took off from Minneapolis flipped over when it was attempting to land in Toronto. Nobody was killed, but at least 17 people were injured. And of course, it's just the latest in a series of air incidents since Trump was sworn in. And since an Army helicopter and an American Airlines plane collided right here in Washington, killing 67 people. Well, today, just 19 days after that tragedy, we are also getting new details about the Trump administration's purge of hundreds of critical air safety workers at the FAA. And I'm going to go into more detail also with somebody who knows a lot about it in just a moment. But the larger point is this. Donald Trump and Elon Musk are screwing around with government in all sorts of ways that impact you personally, and in ways that impact our national security and our safety more broadly. And in that process, they're teaching us a whole lot about all of the ways that government actually keeps us safe. For example, when the U.S. military needs to deploy more nuclear warheads on its planes and submarines to defend us, do you know who actually holds the components for those weapons? Who puts them together, makes sure they're safe, and delivers them to the Pentagon? Well, most of that work is actually done by the same people who also refurbish old nuclear weapons. and dismantle the retired ones. And it all happens at one plant on the sandy plains outside of Amarillo, Texas, called the Pantex plant. It's where the employees and contractors for the Department of Energy are constantly inspecting and outfitting America's nuclear weapons with high explosives, as well as their cores of highly radioactive uranium and plutonium. All of this highly secretive, highly dangerous work is run by the Department of Energy's National Nuclear Security Administration. They oversee the U.S. nuclear stockpile and its components, not just at Pantex, but at an entire network of plants, labs, and bases across the country. The NNSA does all of that and transports nuclear material on U.S. highways using a highly trained and heavily armed fleet of trucks and vehicles. And this is all overseen by career staff with very, very specific expertise. For some of them, decades of it. It's also the sort of government function that we don't think about all the time. I hope you don't think about all the time. But it's always working in the background. It has to work because you can't mess around with the people who handle our nuclear weapons. Well, I mean, at least you thought you can.
The latest bit of information coming in from the National Nuclear Security Agency, which is tasked with overseeing and building the nation's nuclear weapons stockpile. Their notices have gone out with termination for probationary employees effective immediately.
That's right. So as part of its purge of government employees, Elon Musk and his merry band of young Doge axemen unilaterally fired 350 workers at the agency responsible for safeguarding nuclear arms components. And almost immediately, they realized they made a terrible mistake.
NBC News has obtained an email sent to employees of the National Nuclear Security Administration. It says in part the termination letters for some NNSA probationary employees are being rescinded, adding that officials have a good way to get in touch with those personnel.
Do not have a good way to get in touch. Okay, that's right. Under Elon Musk's eye, the Trump White House fired a chunk of the NNSA workforce. And one of the hardest hit offices was the Pantex plant that I was just talking about, near Amarillo, Texas. They saw about 30% of the cuts. You know, that's the plant where employees work on reassembling warheads, one of the most sensitive jobs across the nuclear weapons enterprise, with the highest levels of clearance. But now the geniuses who let those employees go can't figure out how to unfire the people that had just left out of government buildings and email. You literally can't make it up sometimes. The director of the Arms Control Association told the AP, quote, the Jewish people are coming in with absolutely no knowledge of what these departments are responsible for. So yes, they are messing around with the people who literally handle our nuclear bombs. That's what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing. Now, at the same time, the Trump administration is firing hundreds of employees at the FAA, just weeks after the deadliest U.S. air disaster in decades. Those firings reportedly include personnel hired for FAA radar, landing, and navigational aid maintenance, as well as a technician who was working on a critical cruise missile defense. As I mentioned, there's already been a spike in serious and fatal crashes since Trump took office, and since the FAA's chief resigned, in accordance with the demands of Elon Musk. And that list doesn't even include the latest. That Delta plane that crash landed and flipped on the runway in Toronto. That flight left from Minneapolis under FAA supervision, though it was being directed at the time of the crash by their Canadian counterparts. Even still, lots of Americans are understandably wondering, too, if Trump's FAA just more hiring for air safety personnel are underway. So yes, people are pissed. And it's never why. Watch these protests play out across the country. We're also watching a metaphorical ticking time bomb. In a country where we suddenly have to worry about the safety of our air travel and of our world nuclear bombs. So we're going to start to clearly with president of professional aviation safety specialist. Thank you so much for taking the time here. You mentioned this, and I think you're probably answering this question from friends and family from people that are understandably freaked out right now about air travel. And we're simultaneously seeing all of these layoffs and the firings that are happening under Donald Trump and Elon Musk, as well as what feels like an increase in incidents in the air. Under how do you make sense
He lost the job. We didn't get any of those. We're at this point right now,
Than the 350 that have been reported.
could be they haven't told us who it is. As far as we're concerned, the inspectors and the technicians, we have probationary inspectors and technicians that could possibly have gotten the axe, but we don't know that for certain. All we're getting right now is our members reaching out to us and telling us, hey, I lost my job. And we're talking about people that support the entire air traffic control system by virtue of the support work that they do. So let me start out and talk about aeronautical information specialists. They are a skilled group of people that create charts, navigational processes, a performance-based navigation where aircraft can fly in a lot more efficiently. It takes a long time to develop. There's at least 40 of them that are professional and we represent. And
Right.
if they're gone, who's going to create that file? And the work that aviation safety assistants do for our inspectors to make sure that they can actually go out and ramp airplanes and check on pilots and airworthiness of aircraft. They do all of that stuff.
And maybe people the main ones would be but people have to know that. All these
Well,
You have to start looking at quite honestly, we're going to have to wait.
Yeah, it was going to say, does it work? I'm gonna turn you off here. Thank you. Very much. I'm gonna go down here and pretend that I'm gonna get my day started. I still can't get out of here. I'll come up here and do the kitchen after I get up.
Today, America's foreign policy leaders are all over in Europe at the Munich Security Conference, where we've seen Donald Trump's infamous merit-based hiring play out in all its glory this week. And Pete Hegseth, the thought.
We must recognize orders. The United States does not believe that NATO membership of Ukraine is a realistic outcome of negotiated settlement. Any security guarantee must be backed by capable European and non-European troops.
After all hell broke loose, Hegseth was forced to make a new statement the next day.
I want to be clear about something that's NATO membership is a realistic outcome for negotiations. That's stated in coordination with how we're executing these negotiations. I understand that this moment
You're there. You're the Secretary of Defense. You set a policy as the Secretary of Defense. We're
reporting to the president. Now you're like, no, we'll see what Trump does. This all seems to have been a bit much for the senior Republican senator who actually chairs the Armed Services Committee, who called Hegseth's original speech a rookie mistake, adding, I don't know who wrote that speech. It's the kind of thing Tucker Carlson could have written, and Carlson is a fool. And all this was before J.D. Vance attacked our European allies and tried to shake down Ukraine for U.S. support. John Brennan served as director of the CIA. First of all, Mr. Brennan, what do you think about, Hegseth? Also, in addition to what he said about Ukraine, he basically said we're not going to be a guarantor of European security, which is the real kind of 70-year break with kind of global NATO order. That also seems to have been walked back. J.D. Vance seems to be sending some sort of cleanup contradictory messages. What do you understand about what U.S. policy here actually is?
I wish I could tell you, but it's quite clear. I think since this nomination was announced that he was unqualified, and that's the experience to being the Secretary of Defense. He demonstrated quite visibly on the world stage. And so again, I think it just underscores that he was way out of his league right now in terms of trying to represent the U.S. Defense Department with our foreign counterparts. But even more fundamentally, I think what we're seeing now with all of these different statements and conflicting statements, that there's a real lack of coordination within the Trump administration on these very important policies. Previously, the previous administration, for something like this very conference, so you would have a lot of pre-event meetings, discussions, and coordination with the policy statements that were committee. That doesn't seem to have happened here. And so therefore, I think it really is leaving a lot of our allies and partners scratching their heads about what really is the U.S. policy. It seems to be very ad hoc, but they're making up as they go along, and they have reversed course and changed path or whatever. So again, it's been an embarrassment, I think, the past couple of days in terms of what U.S. officials have been doing in Munich and beyond.
One thing that does seem clear, there's a few things that seem clear. One is Trump is going to have some sort of negotiation with Putin that Zelensky may or may not be involved in, or the degree to which he's involved in is as yet to be determined. Maybe it's going to happen in Saudi Arabia of all places. And it also seems, and this has been consistent, there's a lot of reporting that basically what Trump is saying to Zelensky is you have to give us something, including access to precious minerals in Ukraine, including rare earth, which is used for a lot of industrial processes, used to make batteries and other things, and being very frank about it, like essentially saying we're going to take a payment here from you, or else. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it just demonstrates that the Trump administration is going to use whatever tool it can to intimidate, to threaten others. The Trump administration is coming across as very arrogant, self-centered, and is going to push for its interests, irrespective of the interests of our partners and allies. And that's why I think there's just real question marks about what is it that is going to come out of this. If we're going to be shaking down the Ukrainian government, the fact that the Treasury Secretary of the United States appears in Zelensky's office with a draft contract basically giving the United States 50% of the rare earth minerals in Ukraine, it demonstrates, I think, the lack of sophistication and their ignorance about what the I must tell you that the frustration and with the United States has never been more powerful. It's off the scale because they really just see that it's a shady reverse, a complete reverse of what the United States has stood for, especially in terms of European security. That this administration has a much different attitude and approach that really is quite obvious.
Finally, you were at the CIA, director of CIA, you're the station chief in Saudi Arabia. The president's now repeated declarations that we're going to take over Gaza, occupy it in some way, remove all 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to create some real estate development deal that will be owned by the U.S. And what that does to American security and counterterrorism and intelligence in the region.
Well, that very statement, I think, is exceptionally dangerous because basically we're telling 2 million Palestinians we're not only going to ignore your right to self-determination, we're going to kick you out of your homeland that you've been in for many, many generations. And so, therefore, I think it really is quite dangerous. There was a writer who wrote about this who referred to this as just sheer lunacy. It is sheer lunacy. It doesn't grasp the underlying concerns and issues that really have been the source of this problem for so many years. And so, the fact, the thought that the United States is just going to take over Gaza, push out all Palestinians, is just totally absurd. It is very dangerous because there is
John Brennan, thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it.
You might have seen Elon Musk making a speech at a big international conference this week in which he wore a T-shirt that said tech support. It's not a flattering look, but he thought it was hilarious. He tried to say this T-shirt was a very funny joke, that he is White House tech support. For our generation of Howard Phillipses, our generation of the let's kill the U.S. government and we don't care if it's legal or not, our guys have claimed the right to do what they're doing, not just because of their wild-eyed zeal against the U.S. government and the U.S. system of governing. They have claimed the right to do this. They sort of claim that their legitimacy comes from their tech savvy because they're so good with computers. So we're all supposed to get out of their way, or we're supposed to be intimidated or at least confused by what exactly they're doing. Because, wow, it's such a high level, right? It's so high-tech. They're so confident. We need to hear more as possible. 404 Media today reported that on the website for on their own website that Elon Musk's agency Discovery Group has set up for them. It appears that random members of the public have been able to upload joke categories and database entries onto that website that show up as if they are official Doge.gov data. And people can add random stuff to this website, not because there's like a post your public comment here section, but because apparently when Doge designed this website for itself, they didn't know how, or they forgot to make the website secure so other people couldn't post random stuff on it. 404 Media reporting today that people are posting things like, quote, these experts left their database open, ruh-roh, and quote, this is a joke. These are high-tech reports. They haven't been posted, and they've got comments from the Defense Intelligence that Elon Musk and they're working to secure half their website. Is classified information about the National Reconnaissance Office, a federal agency that resides in U.S. intelligence satellites. Quote, Doge just posted secret, no foreign, meaning nobody who's not a U.S. national is supposed to see it, no foreign info on their website. Currently, people are scrambling to check if their info has been accessed. This comes on the heels of Elon Musk telling reporters in the Oval Office that we should all be shocked. The American people should be shocked by the scandalous discovery he and his high-tech team made while apparently pawing through Social Security records and data in that part of the government's guts. Because he's allowed to do that, I guess. He said the scandal that he and his team had uncovered in Social Security data is that there are people in the Social Security database who are listed as being 150 years old. We don't know exactly what Musk was talking about because he's doing stuff that I think he's not allowed to see, and neither are we. But today, people started